Layers are a timeline construct in Flash Professional that allow us to position and animate content in an isolated and structured way. In this lesson, we'll examine the use of layers and see how to group multiple layers within folders. So here I have a blank document, and I have by default layer 1 with one blank keyframe in it. And this is what happens in Flash Professional if you create a new FLA. It'll be set up like this by default. So to actually manage layers, what you would do is you can go in and actually create new layers simply by clicking this little button here. And this creates a number of different layers for us. Of course, we can also delete any of these layers. So to do that, we select a layer and hit this little delete icon. But what happens if we have layers that perhaps are similar? In that case, we can group our layers in folders. So I'll create a new folder here. And once a folder is created, you can see there isn't really anything in it right now. But if I click and drag any of these objects, any of these layers into that folder, I can then at that point control all of those from this folder. So I can toggle the visibility of each of these layers off if I want to. I can lock all of them. And I can also set them all to render as only outlines. I can also collapse the folder if I need more room in the timeline. So let's see some of this in action. I'm going to go and grab out my oval tool here. And I'm simply going to create a bunch of little circles on the stage in layer 1. Alright, that should be good. And let's go in and delete this entire folder. And you can see here when we delete a folder, it also lets you know that it's going to delete any of the layers within that folder. So we'll hit yes. So here's a little trick to take all of these different objects and distribute them to their own separate layer. Why would you want to do this? When animating objects, you want each particular object to be isolated upon its own layer. So let's just use the selection tool to select all the objects, and then we'll go up to Modify, Timeline, Distribute to Layers. So notice when we do this, the layer that they were all previously a part of, which is layer 1, has actually been cleared of all content, and then a number of additional layers have been created, one for each of my objects. So if I delete layer 1, you can see the objects all stay exactly where they are. I can go in and toggle the visibility of each one of these objects to verify that indeed they are on their separate layers. So at this point, I would probably want to go through and rename these layers to something more meaningful. But since they're just basic circles here, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that in this demonstration. However, I could go in and create a folder called Circles, and then select a bunch of these layers and pop them into my Circles layer. And that way I can toggle the visibility on and off, the outline, whatever I wish. So this has been an example of how to use layers and also folders within the Flash Professional CS6 timeline.